Why Dante is actually winning in Fast 11 isn't about explosions, races, or who survives the final battle. It's about control. And Fast X already showed us that Dante never wanted Dom dead in a simple way, because killing Dom would be too easy and too quick, and that's not how you punish a legend. Instead, Dante's entire strategy has been about dismantling Dom piece by piece, forcing him to watch his world collapse while he's still alive. And that alone changes how we should look at Fast 11. Because the story isn't building toward a heroic victory, it's building toward a psychological defeat. Dante doesn't attack the family head-on. He isolates them, separates them, turns every win into a loss, and every escape into another step closer to exhaustion. And the more Dom survives, the more tired he becomes. Not physically, but emotionally, because survival stops feeling like a triumph when it comes with consequences you can't undo. What makes Dante dangerous isn't that he's stronger or smarter in a traditional sense. It's that he understands Dom better than Dom understands himself. He knows that Dom's greatest weakness is the belief that he must always be the one to take the hit, the one to stand in front of danger. And Dante uses that belief as a weapon, setting traps where the only way out requires sacrifice, not strategy. Fast X hinted at this multiple times, especially in moments where Dom realizes too late that every choice he makes saves someone but puts someone else at risk. And that's the kind of villain who doesn't need to win the final fight, because by the time the fight happens, the damage is already done. In Fast 11, Dante winning doesn't mean he walks away alive. It means Dom loses something he can never get back. And the scariest possibility is that what Dom loses isn't a person, but the idea that he can keep everyone safe, because once that belief breaks, the entire foundation of the franchise shifts. This is why Dante feels less like a final boss and more like a mirror, reflecting back everything Dom has done over the years, every risk he took, every line he crossed, every moment where survival mattered more than consequence. And Fast 11 has the opportunity to turn that reflection into a verdict, not delivered by the villain, but by Dom himself. If Dante pushes Dom into a situation where the only way to stop the cycle is to remove himself from it, then Dante has already won before the ending even arrives. Because victory in this story isn't about who drives away from the wreckage, it's about who controls the meaning of the ending. And Dante's greatest success may be forcing Dom to choose an ending that saves the family but ends the legend, which raises the uncomfortable question of whether Fast 11 is really about defeating Dante at all, or whether it's about Dom finally realizing that the only way to truly protect his family is to stop being the center of every battle and accept a loss that looks like defeat on the surface but feels like victory to everyone else, which naturally leads to wondering what kind of ending Fast 11 can even have if the villain's plan works exactly as intended, and whether the final image of the franchise is meant to show a hero standing tall or a family standing together without hymen. Once you start looking at Fast 11 through that lens, Dante's plan stops feeling chaotic and starts feeling disturbingly precise, because everything he does is designed to corner Dom into repeating the same mistake over and over again, stepping forward when he should step back, choosing responsibility over rest, action over absence. And that repetition is exactly how legends burn out, not in one dramatic moment, but through a series of choices that slowly erase the possibility of a happy ending. Dante doesn't need Dom to suffer physically. He needs Dom to understand that every time he saves the family, he teaches them to depend on him even more. And dependence is the real trap, because the stronger Dom becomes, the harder it is for the family to imagine life without him, which makes the eventual separation even more devastating. This turns Fast 11 into a story about inevitability rather than surprise, because the audience isn't waiting to see if Dom survives the final act. They're waiting to see how long he can delay what has already been set in motion. And that tension is far more powerful than any cliffhanger explosion. Dante winning also reframes the idea of justice in the franchise, because Fast and Furious has always resolved conflict through dominance. Whoever hits harder or drives faster earns the right to walk away. But Dante doesn't care about walking away. He cares about leaving scars that don't heal. And if Fast 11 commits to that idea, the ending can't be clean or triumphant. It has to feel incomplete, like something essential is missing, because that absence is the proof that the villain succeeded. There's also the uncomfortable possibility that Dom himself begins to understand Dante's logic before anyone else does, realizing that as long as he's alive and active, the cycle never truly ends. New enemies rise, old ghosts return, and the family is forever pulled back into chaos. And that realization transforms Dom from a fighter into a decision maker. Someone who sees the bigger picture even when it hurts. If that's the direction Fast 11 takes, then Dante doesn't need to be present in the final moments at all, because his influence lingers, shaping Dom's final choice from a distance, like a shadow that never fully disappears. And that kind of villainy is far more unsettling than a final showdown, because it suggests that the real battle was never physical to begin with. This also explains why a traditional victory would feel hollow, because defeating Dante without addressing the underlying cycle would just reset the board for another sequel, another threat, another reason for Dom to step back into danger. And Fast 11 feels positioned as the film that finally refuses to reset, choosing consequence over continuation, meaning over momentum, which brings everything back to the question of whether Dom's greatest act of protection is one last, impossible escape or the decision to let the story end with him no longer at its center, and whether the audience is actually ready for a fast and furious ending where winning doesn't look like winning at all and instead feels like the quiet confirmation that Dante understood the game better than anyone else and played it to its conclusion. And if that's true, then the most dangerous moment in Fast 11 is it a chase or a shootout? It's the silence right before the final decision, because silence is where Dom has always struggled the most. It's where memories of Letty, Brian, and the weight of every promise he's ever made start colliding, and Dante knows that. He knows Dom is built to react, not to disappear. That's why the final stretch of the story could feel strangely restrained, almost smaller in scale, as if the world itself is holding its breath. Because when everything is loud, Dom knows who he is. But when everything slows down, he is forced to confront the idea that being the protector might also mean becoming the absence everyone has to grow around. This reframes the idea of sacrifice in a way the franchise has never fully committed to before, because sacrifice usually means risking your life and surviving anyway, walking away battered but victorious, while this time the sacrifice might be choosing not to return at all, choosing to break the pattern rather than dominate it. Dante's real victory wouldn't be Dom's death on screen. It would be Dom choosing an ending that can't be undone by another engine revving in the distance. And that's what makes the theory so unsettling, because it suggests that Fast 11 isn't about shock value or closure. It's about permanence. The family surviving without Dom would be the proof that his mission actually worked, that everything he fought for finally reached a point where it no longer needed him at the center. And that idea alone is more emotionally dangerous than any villain, because it forces the audience to accept growth as loss. Whether Fast 11 has the courage to go that far is still uncertain. But all the pieces are there. The villain who doesn't need to win loudly, the hero who's tired of being necessary, and a franchise that has quietly run out of ways to raise the stakes without changing the rules. And if those threads really converge, the ending won't feel like an explosion. It will feel like a door closing softly. The kind you don't realize is final until you turn around and notice there's no sound behind you anymore, and that the road ahead looks empty in a way that feels deliberate rather than tragic, leaving just enough uncertainty to wonder whether Dom is truly gone or simply watching from somewhere beyond the story, letting the engines fade while the legacy keeps moving forward without Hyman. If Fast 11 really commits to this direction, the ending won't be loud or explosive. It will be quiet, almost uncomfortable. Because Dom's final act wouldn't be about winning. It would be about letting go, choosing an ending that can't be reset by another race or another enemy. And that choice would be the true consequence Dante was always pushing him toward. The family moving forward without Dom wouldn't feel like defeat. It would feel like proof that everything he protected finally became strong enough to stand on its own, leaving the story to close not with an engine roaring back to life, but with the sense that the road continues, just without him at the center. And that uncertainty, more than any cliffhanger, is what would make Fast 11 impossible to forget.